All right. My name is Brigham Mellor. I oversee as was introduced, I oversee the business and economic research that's produced by EDC Utah to both our clients and investors. Our investors are groups that participate in EDC Utah and help fund our organization. Our primary mission is to increase jobs and capital investment within the state of Utah. So we are contracted with the state of Utah and a lot of municipalities and counties within the state of Utah, and a lot of the companies that you work for, in fact, to recruit businesses to the state of Utah. And and those are our clients. So our clients are the companies that are investigating, possibly locating here in the state of Utah or expanding within the state of Utah. The people that we interact with most often are a sort of pseudo broker, real estate broker of sorts that is contracted by the company that's investigating Utah or investigating a number of other states. Those individuals are called site selectors. So we assist site selectors with making introductions to the communities. We don't have any funds that we distribute to companies. That's GOED's task, is to award incentives to the companies that look at the state of Utah. We do assess the value of the state, or a value to the company to the state of Utah, so that local municipalities and the state can assess whether it's a company that they want to incentivize or not. All of the companies that we interact with are in an expansion phase, and they could locate here in the state of Utah, or they could locate in Nevada, they could locate anywhere in the Intermountain West, they could locate anywhere in the world. One of the companies, for example, that I worked with closely over the last month was Indus Valley Partners. So these guys manage 25% they have 25% market share of all software that's produced for the I've totally spaced it. The hedge fund managing industry. So they produce that software, and they have the majority of their operations are in India, and they have about 50 employees that are in Manhattan, and we're investigating coming to Utah. One of our main competitors right now is Texas. Used to be Arizona, and then Arizona has kind of an unstable political environment in recent years, and so that kind of companies kind of shy away from that kind of stuff. So our main task is to resolve concerns and to assist the company in evaluating the risk in coming to the state of Utah. There's a when they're looking at an area, their main concern is, am I going to be able to operate my company there? Is it going to be cost effective? And so we work with other communities. We'll set up interviews so that they can interview like companies in the area to see if it's going to be viable. And then if there is a weakness, what's the financial dollar amount that it's going to cost to overcome that weakness within a community? And so that kind of gives you an idea of what my background is and what role we play in the economic development of the state of Utah. So.
Thank you. I'm DeLynn Fielding, and it's always interesting to hear you introduced and learn more about yourself in doing that. I've been with the state of Utah for just about 6 weeks now or so, and in our assignment, there's 3 of us in our department. Myself, Dan Royal, who's the incentive analyst, and Jake Hardman, whose office is actually in Cedar City, and he is the outreach specialist. In the last 6 weeks, Jake added up, and we'd gone over 4,400 miles as we visited the 25 rural counties. I am glad to, and on our purpose in doing that, previously we'd say, okay, here's a bunch of programs, now you guys go do what you want with it. We're changing that, and we're saying, what is your number one priority? What is your number one problem, your number one difficulty, obstacle to overcome, something that you need to be fixed or resolved? And then we're going to take the programs, adjust them if necessary, and see what we can bring to bear on resolving those number one priorities in rural Utah. This was the first question I asked the Lieutenant Governor as we were discussing this. He said, not the 4 counties. There's 29, if you're familiar with your geography, and so that leaves 25 for us. Yesterday, I was in Junction, which is the capital city of Paiute County. And in all of the cases, never once in rural Utah has anyone ever said, well, we just can't get internet. We need broadband. We can't do thus and so. That has never once come up. I really feel sorry for you guys on the Wasatch Front in trying to get internet connection with any kind of speed at all. Now, maybe Provo is going to happen with Google, but some of the other areas, I'm sorry, Orangeville does better than you guys. It's pathetic. It really does. The reason why is because the local companies understand the importance of broadband to their community. And that's something that they can provide. So in Orangeville or Castledale or Elmo or Cleveland, did you know we had a Cleveland, Utah? Or Junction, you can sit down and without any problem stream high definition Netflix or Amazon, okay? And it just is no biggie. And the cost is more than reasonable. In fact, it's less expensive for me to get it in rural Utah than it is in my condo in Salt Lake. And I've just been going through that with somebody or other up here. Anyway, it's a pitch. If you want to locate your IT company and you want excited people to have you come into town and to be able to provide your broadband needs, seriously consider rural Utah. And Brock can take care of it. Now, that brings me to the next point. The important thing for economic development is the local economic development people, whoever that is, needs to sit down and have a conversation with the provider or providers so that you know where they can do it and where they can't. And this is going to be a little bit tougher than this area, but we can do it here, and get that understanding so that you don't have to be the technician to know how to make that connection, but you do need to know that it's available here and it'll be a little bit more difficult here. That's an important aspect, that communication, that collaboration with your broadband provider is essential. And the one thing that we did in Carbon County is we actively worked on getting more web presence, and that is more websites. We actively taught and promoted and found web designers and the companies that needed a web presence and tried to connect them so that was there. That and social media, the Facebook and this type, Twitter, those kind of things. That was an important aspect, and it paid off. It didn't pay off so that Spencer is going to notice it in his numbers in Salt Lake. But in rural Utah, a job or 2 or 10 is a big deal, and we're excited for that. Up here, nobody notices. But there, it makes a difference, and it makes a difference in the area. And again, so by focusing on web presence and Facebook and the social media, it really did make a difference to, Southeast Utah Paint. And the mailbox wrapper company that's inside that, Southeast Wallpaper and Paint. It makes a difference to that. I don't know if I forgot anything else I was going to say.
Well, as was said, I'm Brock Johansen. I'm the CEO of Emery Telcom, and we're out of Orangeville. We serve Carbon, Emery, Grand, and a little bit of San Juan, but not too much. I feel like I don't just represent Emery here, though. I also serve on the board for the Utah Rural Telecom Association that's sponsoring some of the event here, and I also am a manager for WFN, which is our Western Fiber network. So I feel like I represent all the rurals here, and I'm going to echo what DeLynn said. And let me describe a little bit about Emery Telcom, just so you know what we are. We have a little different charge, and I think a lot of the people upstate do not understand that charge. As DeLynn said, we really see ourselves as partners in the community, and it is even more so for an Emery Telcom. What happened in Emery Telcom is in 1950, we still didn't have decent telecommunications services down in Emery County, and the only town that the Bell companies would come down and serve was Huntington. And so the rest of the companies were left out. We had a toll line, and that was about it. And so the members of the community got together, and they pitched a bunch of money into a pot and formed a cooperative, just like your farm co-ops that you hear about. And they formed a telephone cooperative. And it's managed by the people that have a telephone line in Emery County. That's who my boss is. They sit on our board. And in fact, DeLynn's had the opportunity to be one of the board members and be my boss in the past. And they're lay members out of the community that tell me how to help the community. And that's really what we see our partnership as. And so it's a little bit different feeling in rural Utah, and I think it's important for the government officials to understand that that's our goal as far as the rurals are concerned. We really want to see the communities progress. We're not as concerned about paying a dividend because we don't pay dividends. We're a nonprofit. We're concerned about developing our community. And it was nice because DeLynn knew that, and as the person over economic development down there, he knew what my goals were. I knew what his goals were. We had a good relationship. We could talk about any project that he had going on. The other one in our area was Mike McCandless, and Mike McCandless worked for us for many years. And so we had that similar relationship. And I echo what DeLynn was saying on that. It's all about that relationship and making sure that you are a partner with your local provider. Now, just to give an example, I'm going to talk about the three things that, just really quick, that the keynote talked about. He talked about gigabit, he talked about latency, and he talked about virtualization. Those were his top three. So gigabit, I want to change that a little bit. It's fiber, and that's where we need to go in Utah. Gigabit is just what you're pushing across it, and gigabit's great right now. It won't be in the future, but if you get that fiber in, you can put whatever electronics you want on it, and you can go as big as you want. Right now, I'm in the process of 100 gigabit Lambda. That's just one light pushing 100 gigabit. We're working with a project with Strata to push 100 gig across one light of one fiber. And so it's not about a gigabit network. It's about getting the infrastructure in Utah to allow us to easily upgrade to whatever the speed is that's needed at that point. Now, on the gigabit network, I know everybody's talking about that right now. It's interesting for you to understand what actually people need. And right now, we're probably not to the gigabit network, but it'll come. And then it'll be surpassed and we'll need more. Latency. Again, I want to push another plug for fiber, and that's what we need to start thinking about in this state. The keynote mentioned the gigabit Wi-Fi. Gigabit Wi-Fi doesn't really work when you start talking about latency. There's too much latency. So gigabit's your actual throughput, but latency is that delay. And that delay is severely diminished when you start talking fiber. The third thing was virtualization. Virtualization is something that the government officials need to understand here, and I think the examples down that were mentioned below were a good intro, but let me give it a little bit more. Virtualization is where before I would take an individual circuit and I'd build facilities into one location, and then I'd build facilities into another, and I'd put electronics. So this one was talking, this circuit between company A was talking, and then I'd put separate electronics for this company. And then I put separate electronics for this company. What virtualization has allowed us to do is we put one network in, one big Ethernet pipe, and then you can create a completely secure virtual network. And it's, we call it MPLS for those who are technical, but we create an MPLS network. It creates virtual networks that are completely secure where customer A and customer B and customer C are all on the same network, but we create a virtually secure network. What this has done is it has decreased the cost of Ethernet dramatically across the state of Utah and across the nation. So that is coming down the pipe, and you need to understand that. So what Emery Telcom is doing, we have put, we have an MPLS ring, and it's completely redundant. We have fiber that comes through 9 Mile and up through Strata and around to Salt Lake. We have a fiber that comes Highway 6. We have one that goes out to Grand Junction. So we're completely fiber redundant. We have fiber to the curb, right to the curb of every house in Emery County. We're getting there in carbon. So anybody who wants fiber, you hear about Google Fiber all the time, but you don't hear about Emery Fiber, right? Well, we have fiber to, I mean, there's fiber right across DeLynn's buildings lawn in Castledale. It's right in front of his house. And if any of those customers need fiber, we just do the drop across the yard and we're there. And we have that in. And we are doing this because we really do see that internet is the way to promote these rural communities. And I'll add to what DeLynn said. In our economies, we might not be able to get a 400 job company. It's not going to happen unless it's a mine in my area, right? We don't have the workforce to advertise that. But if we can get broaden a base and increase a few customers, we might can hire one more employee. And I'll give 3 quick examples on that. I know my intro is going too long, but I'll use my own personal example. I love telecommunications. My real love is ranching. And I grew up ranching with my dad. And we've ran the same amount of cows our whole lives. And we just, at the end of the fall, we take our calves, we sell them to Salina down to the sell barn. And then we also had a purebred herd that we would sell to local people around there. And I came home and I said, Dad, we're not using the internet. We need a website. We got to get presence out there. And so now we're the second largest breeder in the nation of our breed of cattle. And we have customers in about 25 states. We ship cattle all over the U.S., my dad and I. And we have semen cells all over the U.S. And it's out of Castledale. It's out of my house. And it's all the internet. That's what the internet will do to somebody in rural Utah. But they don't know how to use it. Another example, my little brother, his wife was at home and she was bored. She had a change in job and she was bored, so she started a Camry accessory company. They're huge now, and he's an attorney and he's thinking of quitting to go work for his wife, and they run it out of his house. They're on the Home Shopping Network. They're in they're in a couple of the major retail chains, and it's all out of the internet. That's what it's run on. No, you don't want to know. And another example is Emery Telcom. We started a internet base, and we wanted to increase the people that touch our website. So we started doing a local paper. We mailed to 13,500 homes. That's impressive in our area. To you guys up here, it's not, but we have a readership of 13.5. But we started a really strong web presence. We have 70,000 unique people hit that site every month. 70,000. That's not coming from Carbon and Emery. And they all read our news every day. And we're able to market that to our advertisers. It's all the power of the internet. And DeLynn did a really interesting project, and maybe we can get into that on the question and answers, but getting those local consumers to branch out and get a website. I know we got one here. I'm so excited about the way that GoEd's putting these on and what they're pushing in the state of Utah. We've got bright things in the future because of all the things that GoEd's pushing with the internet. They realize that that's the key, and with that, I'll open it up to questions or whatever.
I have one truth and disclosure I need to make. My statement that I've never gone to a place in rural Utah that that didn't complain. That's not true. It's Blanding, and I'll say the name, Frontier, is just barely getting down there. But I'm also glad for them that Emery Telcom is looking at moving down there too. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you to our three speakers for the great introduction. I've got a couple of questions, and I'm sure many of you do as well. So let me start this discussion, and then we'll open it up to the audience. The focus of this was on economic development, and I think we've heard some great ideas, giving broad perspectives and some very specific instances. I'd like to ask our three panelists to briefly describe what they see as really good ways that communities are marketing broadband specifically as an economic development tool. If you would.
So, specific ways that communities are marketing broadband as a economic development tool.
Yeah.
One, well, it depends on the particular type of industry. You're going to see, if they're trying to attract. I don't know that necessarily broadband is the number one item that you would market to a company that's investigating your area. Workforce is going to be their main concern, and that's why if you have a lot of broadband in rural Utah, there's a possibility that maybe companies still aren't locating in your community. It's not just the broadband component. They want to know that they'll be able to attract the workforce or be able to find the workforce readily available. But one element, if they're extremely high users of data, the main concern would be fiber redundancy. So either assessing the availability of fiber redundancy or what it will cost you to run additional fiber to make your site or the location that you're trying to put one of these heavy data users, what's it going to cost to run two different sources of fiber to that property? And then again, it's all about risk mitigation. If you can tell them, these companies are assessing they have their spreadsheets and they have their models all planned out on what it's going to cost to operate in these different areas. If you can put a dollar value to what it costs to mitigate those risks, like fiber redundancy, or what it's going to cost you to bring somebody in from out of town to operate their business or operate your business operations, what's that going to cost? And so marketing data is important, but also keep in mind that it can be a decision maker and it can make or break a deal, but there's a bunch of other things that are also important that you should also include. But the more information that these people have, you're just mitigating the risk of their decision-making process. So, yeah,
sure.
So
let's repeat the question because everyone may not have heard it in the back.
Yeah, the question was, how do I find out about if there's fiber there, and then the cost if there isn't? So I think on this question, I'll just take it on two prongs. The first prong is you got to look at, I don't attract economic development. I mean, that's these guys' job. I try to help, but that's not my job every day. But I think you're looking at it and you got to assess the needs of that actual customer and say, is this a high bandwidth customer? And again, a lot of those are not going to come into rural Utah. We have had a few. I worked with DeLynn on a call center. They want a redundant fiber into that call center because if they're down, they're down. And so that's, again, goes back to that relationship. And I think that this is important in urban Utah to know where that fiber is, because you guys can get those big customers. You've got the workforce up here. So you need to know where the fiber is, and you need to have that relationship, as DeLynn said, with your local provider to say, all right, where is the fiber? How close are we? If we're not that close, how far will you reasonably build? And so we've had all those discussions with DeLynn, and we said, okay, hey, DeLynn, here's where our fiber is. Mike McCandless, here's where our fiber is. If they're in here, this is easy. If it's not, this is, these are hard areas. And DeLynn there'll be policies. We would always tell DeLynn, and this is just Emery Telcom, but he knew this policy going in. We'll forgo. You look at that customer, and we'll take, if we have to build to them, if it's under, we'll take the first 3 years of revenue and not take a dime of it. We'll put that towards the build. So DeLynn and Mike knew that if it was within 3 years of revenue build-wise, that I'd just go build it, no questions asked. They didn't have to, I'm not going to go even to that customer and ask for any money. We'll just go out and build it. But we had those discussions. They knew kind of where they were, and they had a good enough relationship that they call me up and say, hey, we have somebody looking at this. What would it cost to get there? Is there going to be any upfront? I think that's so important to have that relationship up. And I'm going to put one more plug on that as far as where it's available. This whole, you heard Kelly down here. Kelly's got a grant. How this all came about is that the government is changing our regulation, how they regulate us on the federal level. They decided that it's really important to understand where broadband is. So they provided each state with a grant to map broadband in their state. The problem is that it's residential broadband, okay? So the government, the federal government, wants to map residential broadband. Utah was brilliant. Utah said, hey, we see this as an economic development tool. Let's put it under GOED. I agree with them totally, with the state of Utah and the governor's office. But we've got to transition. We don't want to know where just the residential broadband is. We want to know where the business fiber facilities are. So Kelly's office is working on that. And she's working with the providers to say, and the providers, we went to her and said, hey, if you really want to promote economic development, let's get that mapped. And Kelly's office is looking at how to do that. And we're trying, and the providers are working with her. There are a lot of hoops that has to go through. That's not actual, it's easy on residential. You just say, what's the advertised speed? What's your marketed advertised speed in that area? All right, that's easy. But when you start saying where are facilities, that gets to be a little trickier. But I think that that's where the state needs to go. People need to have an easy access. Till the state does it, and the state's got to work with the providers to give us a comfort level on what they're going to do with our data. All right, but until Kelly's office works that out with us, with the providers, that relationship with your local provider, like DeLynn and I had, or Mike McCandless and I had, is essential. We'll tell you where our fiber is. We never hid that from DeLynn. We'd say, DeLynn, yeah, this is where we're at. So it's that relationship, and I think you'll hear that over and over. It's the relationship.
So I want to touch on the relationship idea just a little bit more. It's come up several times in each of your conversations and introductions. What do you see as the keys to building and maintaining the relationships necessary for this to be a successful tool in economic development? I mean, you've talked about the relationship, Brock, that you had with DeLynn when he was the economic development director in Carbon County. So obviously you know firsthand what building that relationship is like. But elaborate a little bit, if each of you would, on maybe one or two key points about building and maintaining relationships so that it becomes a really effective tool in economic development.
I think the important thing there is to realize you're in a win-win situation. Your job is I need Brock to have fiber to take care of my potential client. Well, that's how he makes money, is to have that fiber there so that he can provide that service. So we're really in a symbiotic relationship in helping each other build our individual business, as it were. Me and getting brownie points for economic development, him in growing the company and getting more revenue, and in providing the service. They're not the enemy. We're both on the same side. And if you go about it in any other way, it's a mistake. I mean, I can be his best salesman. And he knows that, he recognizes that. We have meetings and he sends friends over and they say, hey, how can we help? What do we need to do? What happens? That's collaboration.
Thanks. Brigham, anything you'd add?
I think so one of the tools that we use in our office quite a bit is an operation cost model. So we will assess the value or assess what the company's operating expenses are in the competing locations that they're looking at. And oftentimes we'll produce this model and we deliver it to them. It's not used as a marketing tool because it's specifically data driven. So oftentimes Utah is the most expensive place, especially if it's something software related. Right now we're seeing a lot of software wages are a little bit more than average in the state of Utah versus some of our competing states. So why would we be successful with all of these software companies? A lot of times it has to do with, or any company for that matter, where we're not the cheapest. The reason is because we facilitate doing business here in the state of Utah. So take, for example, the organization that Russ and I work at, EDC Utah. So we represent the whole state of Utah. Then we have local economic developers, municipal, the municipal economic developers and the county economic developers that we work together with. If you were trying to contact the state of Utah and you were looking at, like I said, you were looking at the state of Utah, you probably might come across the governor's office website, and then they would pass you off to us. It would be a seamless transition, and during your process, you would talk with the governor's office, you would talk with EDC Utah, we would help you through your problems. If you were to go to St. Louis, Missouri, you're now interacting with 15 different competing organizations. And this is where, former Governor Huntsman, this is where he had this foresight to see, okay, we have two big economic development organizations in the state of Utah. You have the governor's office and you have EDC Utah. To have two same exact organizations doing the same exact thing doesn't really make a lot of sense. And that was just two. If you go to Missouri right now, you have 15. So EDC Utah takes the business development portion. Go Ed remains, in charge of the incentive portion, and you have this. If you come in and you meet with EDC Utah and you need to talk to data providers, you need to talk to the universities, you need to talk to the transit, the Department of Transportation. You can get all of those people within I've seen some amazing meetings where we had every single school in the state of Utah represented with about 12 hours notification, because we have this really seamless relationship and everybody understands the process and is familiar with how to attract these businesses and how to resolve their concerns. So I think it doesn't matter if it's data, it doesn't matter if it's utilities running to the property, it doesn't matter if it's real estate. The more prepared you are and the more efficient you are to address concerns, and the greater that we work together, the more successful we'll be. Oftentimes if the company stands to lose a few extra dollars by locating somewhere else than the state of Utah, they just think it's a lot easier to do business in the state of Utah. Those people are a lot more capable, and they're a lot easier to work with than some of these other organizations where, we tried to assess the schools, we tried to talk to the schools, they were not able to provide, they weren't able to bring the data providers into the room and meet with us. It was just kind of a frustrating process. And so I think in answer to the relationship question, it is imperative that you make the information gathering as seamless as possible, and you facilitate that process as easy as possible. It doesn't matter if the data doesn't work in your favor, as long as you're honest and like I said, the relationships or the bonds exist that it make that process is easy. So,
Thanks, Brigham.
I know on EDC Utah, I've been to a lot of their meetings, and that's right. You want to make it easy. The problem with the providers that we have is that there's a lot of different government agencies and groups. If you think about my area, I've got how many city council meetings? I've got county commission meetings. I've got the Department of Tourism or whatever they're called. I've got UDOT. I've got, the BLM. I've got, and I go through it, and I think it's being aware that we're here and that we're trying to build that relationship. And if you've got an issue at your meetings, invite the providers there. I know I'll give a couple of examples. I don't know if it's the Division or Department of Tourism down there. They were having a meeting. We showed up at it without being invited, but we came to it. All right. They would have never thought to invite us. And they said, we're trying to promote tourism down here, and we listened in the back, and we said, look, we've got a local channel that is solely for local tourism. Every time somebody comes into Moab, Utah, and goes to a hotel, the hotel cleaning staff turn to that channel, Channel 6. If you want to promote tourism and keep people a few days extra in Moab or Carbon County, put it on our channel. And we do that for free for the government agencies. We put it on Channel 6 just to promote that. That tourism board had no clue that we had that channel there. They've never thought to invite us to that meeting. We went to them and said, hey, we provide the cable TV in all these hotels. You've got these people that are here to visit. Why don't you advertise on our channel? It's free, But they never thought to even invite us to the meeting. And I'm not blaming them. I'm saying you don't think about inviting a provider to a meeting. You don't think about that relationship a lot of times. But maybe we can help. Another example is our fiber project in Price. Jared Anderson does a lot of our PR work on this side, and he goes to Price City Council meetings all the time. And if we keep that relationship open and we say, if the city knows exactly what we're doing, when they get the complaints on our construction crew messes up somebody's lawn or a sidewalk sinks or something, the city knows we've got that relationship open and we're talking all the time. The second the communication stops is when you have trouble. But I don't care what division of the government. There's so many. I was talking about the security plan, the government, or the emergency preparedness plan. If you want to talk emergency preparedness in an area, your provider ought to be present, right? If things go down, you better have a network up. So think about the meetings you're having and invite your provider. We might not know you're having a meeting, and we probably have staff that'll come.
Great thoughts. I think we've got time for maybe 3 questions or so, we'll start over here.
I could probably talk all day. I won't. My name's Heather Rankin. I'm from Bigwater, Utah. That's in eastern Kane County. We are the forgotten part of Utah. We have no provider. So we have Lake Powell, which generates about $500 million a year in revenue. Where's it going? It's going to Page, Arizona. Page is out of bandwidth. And so from 3 o'clock till 9 o'clock every day, you cannot access the internet. I'm on town council, I'm running for mayor, I also run our utilities, and I just scored have you ever heard of iStar Optics? They're a telescope manufacturing company out of Ravenstein, Germany. They're building an 8-room hotel in Bigwater with 2 observation decks. Right now, I'm a real estate broker by trade, I do the rest for free. I have an office in Page, so every time he flies to America, we have to drive to Page so that he can get on the internet. I don't know where to start, and this is big. I mean, this is Lake Powell. Bigwater was designated by the state House and Senate as the gateway to Lake Powell, and we have nothing. And last March, Verizon cut our phone service, so now we're sitting down there with limited phone service as well. So I'm in need of some guidance.
You have 2 providers in Kanab.
They don't hit Bigwater.
They don't. How far is Bigwater? Incidentally,
57 miles.
how many here have not been to Kanab? Very many. Everybody's been to Kanab? I'm sorry. I'd never been there before. I didn't realize I had to go to Arizona to get to Kanab. It's if you're going that circle. Huh? It depends on which way. That's what I found out, yes. How far is Big Water from Kanab?
57 miles.
57 miles.
How
Oh.
far is it from Page? 17 miles. We get a weird satellite bouncing type internet. We can't get it off like the satellite companies because they won't service us. I have a bed and breakfast out there that wrote a 3-page letter about their experience trying to get internet off of one of the whatever you call it, satellite
Yeah.
systems. So anyway, we are in a pickle, and I would like some.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll call up Brock and say, Brock, help me.
All right. So this is interesting, and I think it brings up an interesting point. I know I got some of the Public Service Commission here. We're in a state of flux in the state of Utah about telecommunications law. The 1996 Act on the federal side went to provide what we call universal service, or service everywhere in the United States for comparable rates, is kind of the overall concept. That ran through last November, and Obama's administration decided that they were going to change that rule. So we're in a state of flux. They didn't pass that through Congress. They went through administrative channels. The state of Utah has got to figure out how to handle that. But there are a few areas in the state, obviously, that even providers just can't make a business case. There are some monies available through the Universal Service Fund, and I don't know if you would qualify, but you might want to talk to your provider about. Okay, talk to the closest one about unserved areas. Well, all right, you could actually file and become a provider there, but there's laws to help you do that. And I would say somebody would come and do it closer. I know some of those areas that you're talking about, and I don't serve down that far south, but I know a few of those areas Beehive has come into. I know South Central's been able to do it, and those two have gone into some of the other small little towns around Lake Powell. And there's programs in the Universal Service Fund to allow that to happen. Now, the Universal Service Fund's under threat right now. We need to make sure that that stays healthy and that the funding's available. All this money that has built these networks out in rural Utah are the providers, but there's also the state and federal Universal Service Funds. With the change in the federal Universal Service Fund, you could actually see less opportunity and less development in rural Utah. Now, the state of Utah has always been one that's promoted rural development. And so our laws currently are very favorable to putting networks in rural Utah. I hope it stays that way. I know that the legislature's getting a lot of pressure the other way, but there are programs available. I can talk to you about it. Okay.
There's a relationship just started, so I hope that pans out well for Big Water. Any other questions that we have from the audience? Yeah.
So do you see the digital divide as being a negative aspect for economic growth where broadband stands?
Digital divide doesn't, in general terms, I don't think a digital divide exists in rural Utah. Now, I might get in trouble with other people about it, but that's just simply not been my experience. Is that a valid thing?
I think the digital divide is not so much, and it exists everywhere, but it's as far as digital divide, as far as networks are available, I think you got as good in rural areas, except for a few that DeLynn's mentioned, a few that was mentioned from the audience. There's very few other areas. The digital divide is not rural-urban, but there is, I think, another example of the digital divide is education, and that's something that I know the governor's office is concerned about, is education of rurals. And I think this is important for economic development people to understand, and DeLynn did an excellent job. He went through and he convinced local rural businesses why it was important to be on the internet. So how do you get your website on? How do you increase your base? How do you get involved with Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is to promote your business? DeLynn's office put a whole program together to go to businesses and say, this is how you can use the internet. And that's needed. I'll give an example. I had a dentist in in our area, our service area, we'll keep it broad so nobody gets in trouble, that was still using fax. They didn't have internet into their business. Now think about the insurance claims, just processing insurance for a dental office that can be saved by just getting internet into them. But you got to show them why internet's important, how they can use it. And I think that still is it's probably not the digital divide, but I'm going to use that to put this point across. You as in your jobs, if you're somebody like DeLynn or Mike McCandless, you can go in and help those businesses. Be a coach. Say, this is how technology can help you, and then invite us in. We'll come in and help. I mean, we have people that can come in and set up websites. We have people that can come in and help them get established, new phone systems, networks inside their business, whatever they want. We can get in and be the technical arm for them. We'll help with that, but people have to know why they need the internet.
Yeah, if there's a divide, it's one of education and generation, if you will. Generations. That's where the divide is. I really don't go with the idea of cost. I don't think the cost, given the cost-benefit ratio, is valid. It's one of education and just, hey, this is how you do it. Oh, well, I can do that. Yeah, you can. Let's do it.
All right, I think our time is about up. If there are any lingering questions, we have about a 10-minute break before the next session starts, and I'm sure our panelists would be happy to meet with any of you one-on-one.